hope to moderate now a panel that's full of very savvy investors who spent a lot of their time in emerging markets and dealing with companies that have traveled borders, and I know that from the conversations that I've had here that's a pressing issue for many of the companies in the system. I was asked to introduce myself briefly. I'm Phil Schmidt. I'm a partner at IBIS Capital, the investment firm behind EdTechXGlobal, the conference. And I'd like to welcome the panelists onto the panel now, and then I'll spend a couple of minutes with each to introduce them. So if you please come up. I refrain from mentioning the football score. Not quite sure what it is now, but it was an interesting game. All right. All right, okay. Well, time to catch up afterwards. So now is time to focus on the subject at hand. So perhaps if we go through a bit on each of you, and let me start sort of in alphabetical order, perhaps, which isn't quite how they're lined up now, but no, this is fine. So I'll start with Luis, who's the second to my right here. Luis Pinto, and Luis has a fascinating background. He started his career with Microsoft in Portugal, and then led sort of the internationalization for one of Intel's biggest partners in sort of K-12 solutions, and he's got a very, very broad background in dealing with projects in over 30 countries and 10 million students. Now Luis is the global operations partner for Learn Capital, which is one of the preeminent early stage investors in EdTech, which many of you will probably be familiar with, based out of the West Coast. And Luis, I know you sort of focus on managing governments and their stakeholders now, and in terms of regional focus, you're on Latin America now. Can you perhaps give us a bit more color to what you do now, and perhaps some of the sort of most pressing issues that you face in your day-to-day job?
Sure. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for inviting. It's really a fascinating journey, I guess, today for all of us here in an event like this, seeing the opportunities in education, because we're tackling problems, but we're generating opportunities for the long term, starting with the idea of a mindset of a lifelong learner, which is still not the case of a lot of the stakeholders, as we recognize. So before my previous job, I was actually trying to sell to governments national deals on implementing infrastructure for education, and it kind of led the opportunity to go around the world and visit more than 60 governments at the time. And you know, you start hearing about the problems that they have, how they are trying to solve it. And now moving to a venture capital investor, Learn Capital, a leading company in Silicon Valley with a lot of the most important investments in the field, it gives an exposure of where the solutions can come from. So that's kind of, for me, a very exciting moment of looking at the issues in the field and finding the right resources and the way to put people working together to try to solve those problems. So of course, in a venture capital firm, you would expect us to be investing and getting the expected returns from the market, and that's what we do. But with that, we hope we're solving problems, and sometimes people kind of ask, how do you split between the vision that other people have here around me on impact investment? And I think we combine both visions of trying to understand how to succeed in the market, but at the same time, how to really solve complicated problems. One of my biggest issues that really bothers me every day is based on a sentence on a paper that was published by the Brookings Institution. The paper is called "Why Wait 100 Years?" And that really bothers me today, because around here, we have people bringing a lot of innovation to the education field, but still it's taking so long for people to recognize that these solutions are viable and can be scalable. And we're still trying to questioning the chicken and the egg effect, if ICT is beneficial to the learning process, how do we get research that really proves to our academic people that we should actually be implementing stuff faster. And I look the other way around. I see the innovation that we are able to implement in many of the most developed markets, and then when you look at the development stages of other markets, how much could you be helping those guys leapfrogging all those hurdles that they still have along the way? And that's kind of, you know, my focus today.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And Lucius, you've touched on a few topics there that are quite relevant, and I think Sean Peterson, like you work for the IFC, and you have a close relationship with Luis because you've invested in one of his funds, and like you're very familiar with sort of these cross-border issues. Sean, just by way of background, he actually can relate probably to quite a few of the authors, if any of you are authors of textbooks and the like, because he's actually published his own little short story at the age of 17. But he's then become a venture capitalist after studying engineering and doing an MBA. And now you're with the IFC, and perhaps you can give us a bit more of a context on where your focus is. I know you're based in the US, but your investment territories are largely emerging markets and Latin America and Africa predominantly. So perhaps tell us a bit more about what you do and the kind of issues that you face as opposed to what Luis is facing.
Thanks for inviting me here, and hopefully everyone can hear me. And I'd like to point out my socks brought you good luck. You guys won. But the quick of it is as the IFC, some people know it, some people don't, but we're the for-profit arm of the World Bank, and the focus within education for our venture capital unit, and our venture capital unit is what I helped set up, which does more than just education. We also do consumer internet, clean tech, and health tech. But within the education sector, our focus is obviously improving access and improving quality. And that's our overarching mandate, and the areas that we're most excited about are areas of upskilling and e-learning, and we also have strong interest in low-cost schools as well as supplemental learning. We overlap quite well. In fact, Luis and I were last together in, well, actually in a few different places, but not too far long ago in India, even though we're both more Latin American focused, so that kind of points to the internationalization of, I think, EdTech. And you know, we're excited to look at companies that need capital to either go tech transfer, so a European company looking to go into the emerging markets, or an emerging markets-based company. We spend most of our time, I would say, in India, China, and Latin America, but we are actively looking for opportunities as well in Africa. And I think the thing that probably bothers me most is that I see a lot of companies sometimes that seem to be solving the same problem, and I often wonder, you know, do they need that localization to succeed, or is there a true global play in some of those spaces? And that sometimes prohibits me from, you know, being able to take the next step and invest. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks. And so moving from the sort of territory focus of Latin America, let's migrate all the way over to Vincent, who's really focused on China and has a very strong background. And we're also migrating out of the sort of pure VC world into a trade and corporate investment world. Vincent has an investment background with a family office where he's been successfully investing after sort of an operational career in product and marketing. And now you're with NetDragon, and perhaps you can introduce that organization briefly, what its unique aspects are, how it's sort of trying to introduce gaming aspects and fun into learning, and perhaps explain a bit more what you do exactly and the challenges you face.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me here. So very interesting. I think the role that I have, you know, is not a VC, like typical VC. Mean like, you know, for investing for mostly financial reason. We're investing for, at least what I'm doing right now is mostly for the strategic, right? Corporate development, strategic reason. So a lot of time I would describe maybe just starting to say, you know, it's from my view, is maybe not 10 times, would be 5 times more difficult than just picking a good team, good company, and then we believe that it will work, and then why don't we invest? I'm making it too simple, I know. But a little bit back to NetDragon. So maybe some of you heard about it. That's good. They're a very low-key company. Even when I joined the company less than 2 years ago, before that, Philip was talking, I was managing a fund for a family office. And then when I first met the CFO, and then it was like, okay, which company is it? And then he mentioned a couple of things. The most catching things that really excite me is, so the company NetDragon, they built the world third biggest app store, like a mobile app store in the world. So they're the biggest in China, but after iOS and Google Play, they're the biggest in the world with more than 10 billion download and 300, 400 million user. So at that time was around 2013, and then they sold the business in 2013 to Baidu. So that's a very successful exit. But the company have a very long gaming history. They create good games, but part of the DNA I call is how to engage the user, right? How to design something that a gamer like, a student like immediately, right? If the gaming industry, if you're a gamer, you play a game that 5 minutes or even less than that, it sucks. You won't never go back. You probably download another one and then play another one. So I think that's part of the DNA for them to go into. After that transaction in 2013, they decided to go into learning, or you call the education industry, which is in China. There's a lot of government policy to incentivize company to try to do something like what U.S. have done. Digitalize it. Talk about new pedagogy. So anyway, I think that's what right now. Fast forward, the company right now focus on 3 things: games, education, and guess what? The last one. Mobile application, because we sold that the biggest mobile app store to Baidu. So that's what the 3 element. But I think I saw a lot later when we talk about, in fact, like you mentioned, India. We have chance we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how to look at those 3 components I just mentioned.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that segue. Now we're coming to India from a heritage perspective. Vineet from the Omidyar Network. Indian by birth, but, well, British educated, if I may say so. So he spent some time as an investment manager and now works for the Omidyar Network of Pierre Omidyar, who was one of the founders of eBay. And in terms of geographic focus, you're really mostly active in Africa, if not exclusively African in your focus. So can you perhaps give us a bit more of an introduction in Omidyar Network, specifically your role and a couple of issues that you face?
Sure. So the best way of describing ourselves is we're a private, philanthropically motivated group. We are founded by Pam and Pierre. Our objective is to look for things that we think will have a tremendous positive social impact. We are relatively unique, no longer unique. It's delighting to see Chan Zuckerberg and others also sort of following in Pam and Pierre's wake in terms of we have the ability to do grants and also to do equity investments. So the way we describe ourselves is a combination of venture philanthropy and venture impact. What we look for are ideas, early stage, classically Series A type of ideas, and teams which we think will have a very, very positive social impact, and then we look to help them scale. The firm itself works globally across 5 core sectors. My own focus is about 80% of my time is spent for education. In education, we are really trying to look for things that will help drive better quality education at scale in some sustainable way, particularly for the bottom 3 quintiles. So that's a lot of things to unpack in there. But we're really, in its essence, looking for things that really will lead to better quality education and are affordable for the poorest 3 quintiles of the population. That's where we see a tremendous amount of talent that is wasted, and so that's where the mission is. So my job is actually quite fun. You get to look at a lot of interesting different ideas. You also start to see a lot of the challenges, because we're not just looking for ideas. We want to actually then help the entrepreneurs scale those ideas so that hundreds of thousands or millions, ideally, of people, of families, of learners, of kids are better off.
Great. And so you're at the very early stage of investment, and perhaps a little earlier than, say, Sean, where you come in sort of seed and A, and you come in B series funding. But I think across the sort of investment spectrum here, we all see similar challenges. And one of the key challenges that I've come across in many of the conversations here already in the last day or two, and generally in our life as investors and advisors, is the challenge of, we are an early stage startup and we have tremendously long sales cycles. How do we overcome this 24-month sales cycle with these institutions? They're so slow moving. Do you guys have any experiences, any specific examples or ways of overcoming these long sales cycles? And that has to do with, who do you sell to? Are you a B2C, a business to consumer play? Are you a B2B play? Do you sell to corporates, or do you sell to governments? And I don't know if it was one of you or somebody else mentioned to me, once I see a company pivot from a consumer to a corporate play, that's usually a signal of death, because they can't sell to a government or to an institution. So perhaps give us your views on which are the most successful models that you've seen in terms of who to sell to and what the kind of revenue sources typically are. Sean, do we want to start with you?
Wow, that was unfortunate. I probably should have walked on stage last. I mean, look, I have to, we're the for-profit arm. When we're investing, we're definitely looking for a financial return. B2C is just much simpler to understand. We know the metrics. They often look like a consumer internet type of play. We get that. But, we do recognize, much like our energy investments that we do in tech, B2G is a reality. And B2G can often get you quickly to scale. It just takes a long time. So I feel like your question is painful, because we have the debates internally. I would simply say, if I've got a B2G with multiple Gs, as in not one G, but a couple of governments and a couple of schools, systems, we can get more comfortable in looking at an opportunity. And that's diversification, which of course means you've got longer burn, because you're trying to diversify your base, and that means you would have had to raise more capital during that period of time before I looked at you. I don't have brilliant ideas, because I actually think B2G can create a very scalable opportunity, and I don't like to presume that we only do B2C. So I've just officially not answered the question, and I think Luis has a great answer.
Yeah, so I don't know if Sean is playing the investor role to me, but anyway, I take it because it's part of what I do. So one of the things, since I was on the other side, selling to governments, even within our portfolio, I'm helping some companies drive business to governments. But I also, when I get startups, I try to go over the models and try to discuss the opportunities. It's about the market mapping against the strategy that they have at that moment. Because when the moment changes, they may change that strategy as well. So it really depends on the opportunity, sometimes combined with the short term. I would say, and there's a friend that has a sentence that says, startups, mostly the Silicon Valley arena, they live in dog years, which means that they go too fast. So when you think about governments and scaling, you need to be patient. But the nature of competitiveness, of being a startup, raising money, standing in the crowd, I think raises that expectation that something can be really easy. Also, the investors, a few years ago, probably the model that people were incentivizing in EdTech was about the consumer. Because when you think about the United States, it's a model that proved that it works. But then what about global competitiveness? They want to create the next multinational company. They need to face the challenges. And one of those challenges are institutions, either on the corporate side or the governmental side. When you say 24 months, I can say maybe it's too long for some, maybe it's very good for others. So depending on your model, it may fit actually the longer term strategy of the company. But if you're already in a very difficult moment, maybe that's not the way to go.
Right. And Vincent, perhaps I can ask you actually from sort of a perspective of overcoming this. Often I see companies trying to strike commercial partnerships with trade players, and I sell a minority stake to company XYZ who is large, who has a large distributed sales force in my target country, be it in China, for example. Do you see that as a successful model?
I think I want to piggyback on the last question first, because my answer is it depends on which country you're doing business with, right? So B2C work in majority of and also depends on your product too, I'm sorry, yeah. For example, the English learning, I think we see a lot of successful B2C angle in any other country, doesn't matter what country in the world. But then for other product, then for US, for UK, B2C work, and then when we go into China, even in Europe, Western Europe, I'm not even talking about Eastern, have to go with the B2G, the government part of it. So that's the first part of the answer. I think that follow up on that second question you asked, I think. So if you, in fact, maybe use our NetDragon as an example. So last year we acquired a publicly listed company called Promethean in UK. So they do the interactive whiteboard, solution, class flow, a lot of combination of hardware and software. One of the reasons, there are many reasons, of course. One of the big reasons is they are well-known brand. They have a very good sales network already set up with UK, US, and around the world. They have 40 million student registration and things like that. So, and then it's but to be honest, our DNA is B2C. I mean, consumer, because the end user playing our games. So we were hesitating a little bit, are we, do we know what we're buying, right? Do we know them, how to tackle the government industry or, the district? But then it end up is, if we want to get immediate presence, to your point, we need to get, next day, time to market, instead of building my own sales force, I can immediately get that sales force, after I finish the transaction. So that's a win-win for me. And then I can slowly talk about the B2C, because once I have the user, then I can upsell, cross-sell my other product. So that, I think, it depends. And why now, maybe last year was the B2G part, and then now I'm all focused on B2C. So I think it's have to be very dynamic and depends on where you're going, and again, if we talk about India, I would talk about B2C.
Right, right. Vinit, what's your perspective? Do you control some of that perhaps with the sources of capital? Do you think, you mentioned to me before we spoke offline that you think it's important to have local capital as well as international capital in an investment. Does that solve some of these issues and give access to customers, or how do you tackle that?
It can. It sort of depends on what type of capital it is. Because we invest across a lot of different aspects of the education chain, I'll keep my answers focused on the EdTech aspects. I think that'll be of most interest to the folks here. So yes, if you're a startup in EdTech, the odds are stacked against you, right? The incumbents have so many advantages, and so you do end up with long sales cycles. You do end up with having to invest in very heavy relationships if what you want is very large scale. It is possible. We're invested in a company in Brazil called Geeky, and they just got a very, very big contract from the Brazilian government, and are also starting to get into B2B sort of school network sales. So it is possible, but it takes time, and that means you have to invest in a sales team, you have to have the capital to be able to burn to support that. And that's why I say it's sort of, the odds are stacked against startups. Also, often if you do end up talking to some of the publishers, there are some publishers over here, from a startup's perspective, and we position ourselves on the side of the table as the entrepreneurs, it's hard because a lot of these big publishers are big companies. They're as bureaucratic, and you'll find yourself talking to one company or one country operation, and it's like, who makes the decisions? Is it, so those are, again, the sorts of challenges. All hope is not lost, though. So what we're seeing, in particular, one of our edtech companies out of South Africa is actually starting to see some very interesting behavior patterns. And this goes to a point that, Vincent, you were making, which is you have to have a really good product. If you have a product that is giving the customer what it is that they're seeking, right? We keep hearing again and again, education is valued by households. It's something that they're willing to, they will go to many, I'm mixing up my metaphors here. They will sacrifice a lot to be able to get their kids better quality education. But if you're talking about the Global South, if you're talking about the bottom 3 quintiles, their purchasing power isn't great. So traditional freemium models will also struggle. What our investee in South Africa has noticed is they built a product that is just getting huge user engagement. Off the charts, very, very exciting. They were piloted by a major telco, said, we'll pilot your product in one particular area. This major telco found its market share going up by 50%. So this is going to where you have to change, you have to look at what the incentives are. So if you're a major telecoms company, or if you're a major retail, a retail bank, anyone who is dealing with customer acquisition, customer retention, and if you have the ability to say, okay, this is a product that works, which can be sold in a fractional way, can be bundled into airtime, it can be bundled on a monthly use perspective, you're still getting to B2C, but you're not asking poor people to convert. You're making it more affordable for them to be able to pay, or you're bundling it into something else. We think that's really exciting. It's, so hope is not lost. You just have to be very creative.
That's great, and it's really encouraging to see all these business models and successful businesses come on the radar as the hub of innovation for people. Perhaps, Sean, I'll ask you one question specifically around the emerged markets and sort of the US and perhaps European markets that you invest in, and perhaps you can explain how that works from your perspective, and why you invest as sort of an emerging market or development fund, effectively, into something like the US. That's a very established market. Before you answer, though, I'm going to say, after this, I'm going to open up the floor to questions. So please raise your hand if you have a question, and we're going to have people with microphones go around and give you an opportunity to ask the panel directly.
So just quickly to answer that, because I'd love to hear the questions. So the IFC looks at developed country deals, primarily for a couple of different reasons. One is often the technology innovation can often be in or localized to, say, London's come up with a solution, but the best market for it might be South Africa. So it doesn't make sense for them to have started in South Africa, but it makes sense for them to get to South Africa, and that's not naturally what somebody who's sitting in London who's a VC is going to want to back. So it's a really good place for us to be because we get the tech transfer piece. So that would be exciting to us. Separately, a lot of these new technologies in EdTech, and I think Coursera is a perfect example, which we're invested in, where the user base, if you look at it, is fantastically emerging markets, and the user engagement is significantly in those markets, despite what everyone says about bandwidth and all those things. So that, by definition, works for us. So I think for us, we just need to see a meaningful desire by the company that makes sense with their business plan to move into the emerging markets. We don't you don't come to us for money because you need money. It should make sense that you have a business plan that is best served by moving into the emerging markets at that time, and your company is stabilized enough to transfer to there, because it is a challenge. Not just because it's emerging, it's a challenge to cross borders. So that's why. I hope that answered it.
Great. Okay. So do we have questions from the floor? Back there. There's a microphone coming over. If you could just wait for the microphone to arrive, because we're recording the session as well, and then everyone can hear you.
Hello. Yeah, you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Pranav Kapadia. I work for the City and Guilds Group, and we invest a lot in education in terms of we have an investment fund, but we also have a lot of vocational education business in the UK and globally. My question to the panel really is that with all the investments that you're doing, what is the typical time horizon that you're looking for in terms of the return on the investment? Is it because it's slightly different, especially from Vincent's perspective? It's slightly different from the VC perspective for the education because it takes a longer cycle, as we just spoke about earlier. So again, with Sean, you referred to earlier that there was the return on educational investment is longer. So what's the typical investment horizon? That's one question. And the second thing is, with the EdTech space quite fragmented across the world, where do you see the biggest opportunities? Thank you.
Luis, as the most traditional VC among the group, perhaps do you want to take the investment cycle?
It's a very short answer. 7 to 10 years would be the horizon for us to take a look at those exits, yeah.
Right. Anyone want to take an opportunity question? Where do you see biggest opportunities?
Okay. Well, maybe actually the first question is, I think, from my point of view is, what are the other than financial return, what are we looking for, right? That's completely changed the return on, how long does it take? But the second question, I'm a little biased because of course I have the company view and my personal and also the industry view. I think right now, there's a couple of areas. One is the virtual reality stuff. I know that many people are saying it's just a hype, it's a buzzword, but then in education it's no way because it's too expensive, blah 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 blah. I think my simple way to counter that argument is like number one, the cost of whatever, whether it's a hardware or software, is really you have to justify by the value of the school or the teacher, the student that receiving. If you just do we have 50 students in the classroom, everyone I have to spend even $15, my whole budget for the whole year is gone, right? If that's the limitation. But then other than that, then you have to measure if I buy that, we have that solution, then I can replace a lot of other old pedagogical equipment, for example, in the lab. For a lot of the science teaching. So anyway, I think that VR is one area that catching on with many other industry outside of education. So I think that will provide a lot of momentum at least for the next 10 years. But then within VR, I think one of the hot area is two things in education. One is the content. If you can do content good, doesn't matter if it's VR or not. I think that's a very, valuable stuff. The second is the tools for the teacher or for the student to able to create interesting content. Right now, of course, if I ask you to use a Unity free, I don't know many of you heard about it. The editor tool, I think none of the teacher would know how to do it. It's too complicated. So we need a tool for the school or education field to able to employ and create interesting content.
Right. Okay. Did you want to say something?
Yeah,
okay.
just
move the microphone over there.
On the opportunity question, what we're seeing that excites us the most is actually technology transfer in the other direction. We think the days of people developing the ideas in the north and then transferring across to the south are over. The most exciting things we're seeing are entrepreneurs developing ideas in the global south, where people are suddenly saying, so a Brazilian ed tech company we're invested in, Geeky, is going to be piloted in a major G7 school system. Another ed tech company in South Africa called Siavula that we're invested in recently went on a road trip. Their product is going to be also piloted in a major G7 school system. They showed their wares to some US companies, and the US companies, ed tech company will always say, well, my algorithms, your algorithms, but there were certain aspects of their technology, they said, oh, wow, we're not doing that. We're not even going to try to do that. We're going to license your product. That's what is exciting for us. From a more sector perspective, we think that the advances in computational techniques, so machine learning based approaches. You have to build a sophisticated product. It's a non-trivial task. We think there are opportunities in secondary. In maths, in early primary, there's lots and lots of activity. The minute you go up higher grades where you have more sophisticated content, you need a better product. There are not that many people developing that, so if you can move fast and develop something there, you will have a product that will be globally relevant.
Great. Okay, so we have about just under 4 minutes, so maybe if we quick a couple more questions. You have the microphone, go ahead.
That's a quick question. Whether the investors are interested to invest out of the English world. I mean, the target group is not the English people, because most of the examples that we heard from the morning are those investments for the English people and in the language, in English language. Whether there are any best practices or cases that you have invested so far, but the target group is not for the English people.
Okay. Luis, go ahead if you have an example.
I would say it's no longer the barrier that it used to be. It's a question of mindset for many entrepreneurs to actually build in English because they believe they have a bigger addressable market and they are able to replicate across geographies with a mature market perspective and probably a higher margin point. But of course, there's examples in many languages and sectors. It really depends on the opportunity, and the tools are available today to make it affordable for them to actually adjust the operation. But it's a question of focus and strategy, not really a question of language and addressing the demography opportunity.
Perhaps a comment from my side, like the kind of exciting or most exciting startups I see that have sort of language-specific issues or have overcome those are the ones that are actually language agnostic and where the interface is completely without language and purely icon-based. We see some early childhood tools in that sector, which are very interesting investment cases, because if they're apps, they need very thin distribution in many countries only to make their business model viable. So those are quite interesting models we've seen. Okay, good.
Thank you. Hi, sorry. Hi, my name is Krishan Mithu. I'm one of the founders of Provesti. We are a mobile learning platform to recruit and develop the best talent within organizations. Now, we've looking at our next round of investment, which will be sort of a Series A of around 5 to 8 million. I've been speaking to a number of investors already, and I feel there's a lot of sense of nervousness about sort of actually what is the opportunity for deal flow, that perhaps we may have a market slowdown. And given some of the sentiments you've already had about actually EdTech almost being sort of the unloved sector, and bear in mind, EdTech in the UK, particularly in London, is growing as fast as FinTech, which is amazing, and I'm super happy for that. But what impact do you think that will have on EdTech as a whole and the opportunities for other startups to go and grow?
Okay, 1 minute for the take of this one, and then we're done.
Can I just steal 30 seconds to say, we don't see a slowdown. There's a lot of opportunity. There's probably a selective process that didn't exist before, and it's more detailed, I would say. So valuations probably are being corrected in many spaces where they were not correct. The thing about the focus, and you mentioned the UK, and I speak with a lot of people in Europe particularly, the thing that we expect is you have a global mindset and you go away from the UK focus. It may be your point of origin, but for you to be competitive and for us to be interested in investing, we need to see someone that even if you're not there yet, you want to focus on a larger market, and that's kind of a boundary that you don't want to have.
I guess I would just jump in on the slowdown. Been through it with clean tech, and background was in fintech. Exactly, these happen every couple of years. There was 300 solar companies that were created in California at one point, and there only about 2 of them ever really made anything of themselves. So the reality is some of this is just there's 20 people doing the same thing, and it needs to get cold. And the other part is just some of us have gotten ahead of ourselves in valuations. So I wouldn't worry. It's the best will succeed. And thank you, by the way, for the invite.
Well, thank you. Spot on. The clock's on 0 now. And thank you very much for a very interesting panel. Thanks for attending. And if you want to just stay on, we're moving straight into a new panel with a discussion on the social impact of EdTech, which ties into a lot of the aspects that we've heard here right now. So just a minute to switch over and we'll go straight on. Thank you.